Unaware his wife secretly paid for his medical degree, husband abandoned her and their triplets for a richer woman. What she did next crushed him. He didn't just insult her. He stood in the middle of their cramped living room, suitcase already packed in the hallway, and told the woman still healing after a difficult early birth that she and their three newborns were too much for the future he wanted. Then said the words that broke everything, "I'm leaving." Weeks after their premature triplets were discharged from the NICU and brought home, the tiny bassinets sat side by side in the small apartment, their babies finally breathing on their own. Sarah Carter was exhausted, sore, and doing midnight feedings alone, but she still believed Daniel was overwhelmed, not gone. Instead, he crossed his arms, avoided her eyes, and showed her exactly who he had become. "This life is suffocating," he said, gesturing at the apartment and the sleeping babies. "I didn't work this hard to drown in diapers and debt. Vanessa understands me. She elevates me. You don't, and you never will." In a few sentences, he pushed their children onto her as her responsibility, promised he'd support them, eventually, and grabbed the suitcase he had already packed, walking out of the door to be with Vanessa, the wealthy fundraising board woman who matched the polished world he craved more than his own family. He thought he was trading up. He thought he was leaving behind a dependent wife who gave nothing. He thought no one knew how he really got that white coat. What he never imagined was this: the quiet woman he had just abandoned with three premature infants was the one who had secretly paid for almost every dollar of his medical degree, using her late father's inheritance, student loans in her own name, and years of double shifts he never bothered to look at. In a drawer he rarely touched, she had already kept the tuition receipts, the bank transfers, the loan papers. And on her phone, there was an accidental voicemail where his own voice promised to be free from the babies and her as soon as he could. Dear viewers, thank you for being here. If you watch without subscribing, it's like letting Sarah's voice stay buried under his lies and excuses. When you click that button, you stand with every person who was used, abandoned, and quietly holding proof of what was done to them. Please subscribe now, and in the comments, tell me where you're watching from and what you would have done in Sarah's place. Sarah Bennett, 23 years old, stood frozen in the dim back hallway of the assisted living center where her mother stayed. Her chest rose too fast, breath catching under the pressure of exhaustion. She had just rushed from her evening cleaning shift at a small roadside lodge, still wearing her work shoes, and now she tied on the pale blue caregiver apron for her second job. Her hands trembled, not from fear, but from the weight of responsibility she'd carried for years. Life didn't wait for her. Bills didn't wait. Her mother's illness didn't wait. And still, she moved forward. Sarah's world was shaped by loss long before adulthood arrived. Her father, David Bennett, had passed when she was 9, leaving behind a quiet legacy, a small inheritance built from years of repairing old watches and antique clocks in their garage. He worked with gentle hands and soft sighs, saying time was precious and people deserved to hold on to the parts that mattered. He left just enough money to give Sarah a start someday, a little safety net. Sarah protected that inheritance for years. She tucked it away, never touched it, never even spoke of it. Her mother used to say it was David's last act of love, something meant to carry Sarah toward her future. But life had other plans. Her mother's condition worsened, and Sarah stepped into the role of caretaker long before she was ready. Tonight, as she stood in the hallway, adjusting her apron, a memory rose without warning. She had been 14, sitting cross-legged outside her parents' bedroom, hugging her knees, listening through a cracked door. Her mother's voice, tired but hopeful, floated through the silence. "Find someone whose dreams you can share," Lila whispered, "not someone you have to chase." Those words rooted themselves deep, even when she didn't yet know why they hurt. Years later, at 23, juggling 2 jobs, with a mother depending on her and a tiny inheritance she guarded like a fragile treasure, Sarah clung to that memory in the quietest moments of her day. When her shift ended that night, she stepped outside into the cool air and exhaled slowly. Her muscles finally loosened. That's when she saw him. Daniel Carter, 24. Tall, hair slightly messy like he had run a hand through it too many times, a worn book bag on his shoulder. He worked weekend night janitor shifts at the same facility, while taking pre-med and science classes at the community college nearby, trying to keep up with tuition he could barely afford. His face, though handsome, carried a heaviness that didn't belong to someone his age. His smile tried to appear light but cracked around the edges. "Rough night?" Sarah asked, noticing the slump in his shoulders. He laughed softly, but the sound lacked warmth. "More like rough life." They walked toward the bench outside the entrance. She had known him for a few months, a passing friendship born from shared exhaustion and the small comfort of understanding. Tonight he looked different, not just tired, shaken. He held a letter in his hand, the envelope crumpled. He hesitated, then let her see it. "Rejected," he whispered. Her eyes softened. "Again," he nodded. "They said there's no financial package for me. The medical program accepted me if I can pay, but I can't clear the tuition. Without money, they'll give my spot to someone else next semester." Then something unguarded slipped out of him, something raw. "I just want a chance to prove I'm not a nobody." The words cracked open more truth than he usually allowed, and Sarah listened, because Daniel, as she learned over time, carried his own scars. His father left when he was a boy, disappearing in the middle of a winter night without goodbye. His mother worked herself into silence, always exhausted, always worried, never present. Daniel grew up believing he had to earn love, achieve enough, become enough, impress enough, or he would be left behind like before. His obsession with success wasn't pure arrogance, it was survival. Sarah understood that kind of survival far too well. She began to see the parts of him he tried to hide, the fear of failure, the desire to prove himself, the hope for something bigger. And somewhere in her chest, a quiet answer formed. She wanted to help. Weeks passed. They grew closer. Their talks stretched late into the night in staff rooms and on quiet benches, both of them clinging to a strange comfort in each other's company. She learned how badly he wanted to be a doctor, not for praise alone, but to escape the life he grew up in, to finally feel worthy. Then came the evening that changed everything. He sat at her small kitchen table in the tiny apartment she rented near the assisted living center. His hands shook as he held another letter from the medical program's financial office. His voice broke just slightly. "They extended the deadline," he said, "but only if I pay the first year's tuition up front. I can't even get loans approved without a cosigner. I don't have anything. No one." He stared at the page, eyes glassy. "I don't know how to keep going. I keep thinking if I could just get in, everything would change. But I can't afford it. I'll never be anything." Sarah looked at him, and her mother's whisper echoed again, older now, wiser in its warning. "Find someone whose dreams you can share." She wanted to share his, not chase him, not lose him, not see him crumble. So later that night, when Daniel left, she walked to the small wooden box her father left her. Inside were the bonds, the saved funds, the inheritance she had kept untouched for over a decade. She opened it slowly, ran her fingers over the papers, felt the weight of sacrifice forming long before she realized its cost. The following week, she went to the administrative office at the medical program. Alone, quiet, determined. She explained that Daniel had been accepted but couldn't secure the funds. The administrator hesitated. Policies, deadlines, rules. But money spoke in ways emotion couldn't. Sarah used her father's inheritance, secretly. She agreed to take additional student loans, in her own name. She signed the tuition paperwork as the primary payer and financial guarantor. Secretly, they reinstated Daniel's place on the condition the payments kept coming from the same account. Daniel never knew. She never told him. She told him something else instead. "A scholarship came through," she said with a gentle smile. "Some private donor support. They said it's for students from difficult backgrounds. They applied it to your account directly." And he believed her, because he needed to. But as the ink dried on the forms, a shadow rose behind her choice, a shadow that would one day walk away from her, long before the cost of her devotion was ever repaid. And in that moment, something small and silent shifted, something that would echo loudly in the next part of their lives. Sarah jolted awake to the sharp buzz of her alarm, her body aching from a late shift the night before. For a moment, she didn't even remember falling asleep. Then it hit her. Daniel's early class, Her own shift, and no time to waste. She sat up fast, heart pounding, because she knew she had only 20 minutes before her next shift, and Daniel needed his notes printed before he left for the hospital. Her life had become a race, a constant sprint. She rushed across the small bedroom she now shared with Daniel. 2 years had passed since she signed those forms. In that time, he started medical school. They had a small courthouse wedding, and she moved into this tiny apartment closer to campus. On paper, she was now Sarah Carter, but most of the financial documents still carried the name she grew up with, Sarah Bennett. She pulled on the same uniform she washed the night before. Her hands shook as she tied her shoes. She wasn't shaking from fear. She was shaking from exhaustion, from doing too much, from giving too much, from wanting a future she hoped they would one day share. But she kept moving. She always kept moving. When Sarah stepped into the kitchen, Daniel was already there, head bent over a medical textbook he bought secondhand. He had dark circles under his eyes but an ambitious glow in the center of his stare. He looked up at her as she slid his printed notes across the table. "Sarah, thank you, really." His voice was warm, grateful, almost tender. Moments like these kept her going. Their early marriage was simple at first. Small apartment, big dreams, endless nights that blurred into mornings. She worked at the assisted living center during the day and at a local lodge in the evenings. Some weekends she still picked up cleaning shifts just to keep up with the tuition payments and interest on the loans in her name. Sometimes she slipped out of work early to hunt down used medical textbooks for Daniel. Older editions, highlighted by strangers, but still helpful. She brought them home like treasures. Daniel would kiss her forehead and say, "When I become a doctor, I'll take care of everything. You won't have to work like this forever, I promise." She believed him. She wanted to, but slowly something else crept in, quietly, almost too soft to notice. One evening, while walking home together after Daniel's study group, he paused near a sleek car parked on the street. The polished surface reflected streetlights like a mirror. Daniel stared at it too long, his eyes lingering on the leather interior, the clean shine, the expensive badge on the front. "Doctors deserve a better life than this," he said with a laugh, as if he were joking. But it didn't sound like a joke. Sarah tucked this moment away, but she ignored the small sting it left behind. She reminded herself that ambition wasn't wrong. Wanting more wasn't wrong. Daniel simply wanted a good life. Still, something in his tone felt foreign. Months rolled by, then years. Daniel moved from basic science classes to clinical rotations. Sarah took extra shifts while he studied late into the night at the hospital library. Their savings disappeared faster than it grew. But she never told him how much she was struggling. She didn't tell him she skipped meals so he wouldn't have to. She didn't tell him her hands blistered from lifting patients alone. She didn't tell him her legs cramped every night from standing too long. Daniel didn't ask, likely too buried in his own battles, but Sarah never blamed him for that. She loved him. That was enough. Then came the day everything changed. Sarah sat in a tiny clinic room, heart trembling as the doctor smiled gently and held up an ultrasound image. "Triplets," he said softly. "Congratulations." Triplets. Sarah's breath caught. Joy, fear, wonder, all tangled together. Daniel was stunned at first, then excited, shouting happily, hugging her tightly, telling her this was the beginning of their beautiful family. For a week, he was more attentive than he had ever been. He went to appointments, asked questions, bragged to classmates that he would be a father of 3 at once. But the pregnancy hit hard. Her body struggled, her energy dropped. The doctors warned that she needed rest, help, and constant monitoring. She needed support, real physical support. Daniel promised he would be there, every appointment, every step. And at first he was. But soon, things changed again. Daniel's hospital responsibilities grew more demanding as he approached graduation and prepared for residency interviews. He came home later, claiming he was studying with classmates or staying for extra rounds. Sarah pushed through her swelling feet and aching back alone most days, telling herself it was temporary. She told herself love just required sacrifice. Then came the night that should have been forgettable, but wasn't. Sarah was sitting on their couch, sorting baby clothes someone from her job donated. She looked up as Daniel entered the apartment, distracted, expression tight in a way she hadn't seen before. His phone buzzed. He glanced at the screen so quickly she almost missed it. A single line flashed before he turned the phone face down. "Dr. L, you coming tonight?" His jaw clenched. His shoulders stiffened, and he slipped the phone into his pocket with a careful, practiced motion. Something cold crawled into Sarah's chest. She didn't say anything. Not yet. But the question formed silently inside her. Who was Dr. L? And why did Daniel look guilty? He kissed her forehead, said he needed to review cases with some residents, and walked into the bedroom. But Sarah noticed something new that night, something she couldn't unsee. Daniel was starting to live two different lives. And as she finished folding the tiny baby clothes, she sensed the first quiet crack forming, one that would only grow deeper in what came next. A loud crash echoed through the apartment as Daniel slammed the front door behind him, his breath heavy, his shoulders tense with a frustration Sarah had never seen before. He tossed his bag onto the floor and snapped, "Why is everything such a mess? I can't come home to this every night." By now, a few months had passed since his graduation. He was officially Dr. Daniel Carter, a first-year resident at the same hospital where he had once been a nervous student. Sarah froze mid-step, holding a basket of folded baby clothes against her belly. The outburst felt sharp, cutting into the quiet evening like glass. For a moment, she simply stared at him, unsure what she had done wrong. His anger softened almost immediately, regret flickering in his eyes, but he didn't apologize. Instead, he rubbed his forehead hard and muttered, "You have no idea how stressful my work is." His words stung. She didn't need a reminder. Her days were long too. Appointments, swelling, dizziness, and preparing for 3 babies at once. But she didn't say that. She swallowed the hurt and set the basket down gently. Daniel walked past her and sat at the kitchen table, buried his face in his hands. Sarah moved quietly around him, her steps soft, her breathing slow. She touched his shoulder lightly. "Is everything okay?" He lifted his head, irritation flashing again. "Sarah, please. You don't understand the burden of being a doctor. People's lives are in my hands. You don't know what it's like to have patients and attendings depending on you all day." The words landed harder than he expected. He didn't notice how she stepped back slightly or how her eyes dimmed. She understood all too well what being depended on felt like. She lived it every day, just in a different way. But she didn't argue. She only nodded. Later that night, as she washed dishes, she heard something she almost never heard anymore. Daniel laughing, not the tired laugh he used at home, not the forced one he gave when he was stressed. This one was light, youthful, full of energy she hadn't seen from him in months. Sarah wiped her hands and stepped toward the hallway, curiosity pushing her feet forward. Daniel was in the bedroom, phone pressed to his ear, voice low but excited. She couldn't hear words, just the tone. Bright, playful, alive. A tone she wished he still used with her. He hung up quickly when he noticed her standing in the doorway. His smile vanished as fast as it appeared. "Who was that?" she asked softly. "Just someone from the hospital," he replied too quickly. "One of the board people. Stop worrying. I have work to do." He walked past her, grabbing his laptop, avoiding her eyes. Sarah stood still for a moment. Something wasn't right. This wasn't about stress or work. This was something deeper, something slipping through cracks she didn't even know existed, and she felt it widening. The reflection deepened in her chest as she remembered something small but important. Daniel had always loved validation. Even back when they first met, she saw how his face lit up when praised, how he straightened his posture when someone with status noticed him. It was harmless then, just insecurity trying to feel worthy. But now, surrounded by doctors, nurses, wealthy donors, and polished professionals, that old need for approval had room to grow, and Sarah sensed it growing too fast. Days passed. Daniel came home later, sometimes after midnight. His clothes smelled of expensive perfume, not just disinfectant and hospital air. He claimed it was cologne from a coworker who hugged everyone. Sarah nodded, but a quiet ache settled into her bones. She told herself he was just tired. She told herself residency was overwhelming. She told herself she was imagining things, but the truth whispered in the back of her mind, steady and unsettling. One afternoon, as Sarah set Daniel's clean scrubs on the bed, his phone buzzed on the nightstand. She didn't mean to look. She only glanced out of reflex. A name lit up the screen. Vanessa. A name she didn't know. A name that didn't belong to anyone he had ever mentioned. The preview bubble showed just a fragment. Board dinner tonight. Can't wait to see... The notification disappeared as the phone locked. When Daniel came out of the shower moments later, she pointed to the phone. Who's Vanessa? He didn't flinch, didn't hesitate. His answer came smooth, almost practiced. She's on the hospital fundraising board. She helps bring in donors. It's nothing. Nothing. The word echoed in her chest, too hollow to believe. And as he kissed her cheek and walked away, his phone still in his hand, she couldn't shake the feeling that nothing was about to become something far worse. And as the quiet evening settled again, Sarah sensed a shift, a small, sharp one, that would only grow sharper in the days to come. Sarah's scream tore through the hospital hallway as nurses rushed her into a delivery room. She wasn't supposed to go into labor yet. Not this early. Not when the baby still needed weeks. Her vision blurred. Her breath broke. Her hands clutched the rails of the hospital bed as contractions crashed through her like waves she couldn't escape. She heard voices, urgent, commanding. 3 babies. We need NICU ready. Move quickly. Blood pressure dropping. Her world spun. Daniel wasn't beside her. He was miles away at a fundraising dinner, dressed in a suit, standing beside Vanessa at a hotel ballroom packed with donors and board members. She had picked out the tie that matched his eyes. She had introduced him around as one of our most promising young doctors. The pain sharpened, slicing through Sarah's ribs. Tears streaked her face, but her voice cracked in one desperate whisper. Please, my babies. Then everything blurred into bright lights and rushing feet. Hours later, Sarah lay in her hospital bed, drained, pale, barely able to lift her head. Her stomach felt empty, hollow. She delivered too soon. The room felt too large, too cold. Machines hummed softly around her. A kind nurse named Emily, middle-aged with soft hands and calm eyes, stepped in. Her role was clear. She was the NICU coordinating nurse assigned to guide new parents in emergencies. She gently brushed hair from Sarah's forehead. You did everything you could, Emily said softly. The triplets are fighters. They're in the NICU getting the best care. I need to see them, Sarah whispered, her voice raw. You will, soon. Let your body rest for a moment. We don't want you collapsing on the way. Sarah tried to breathe normally, but guilt crushed her chest. She felt responsible. If she had rested more, worked less, stressed less. Emily noticed the look in her eyes. Preterm birth with multiples is common. This isn't your fault. Sarah closed her eyes, tears sliding sideways into the pillow. When Daniel finally arrived, 2 hours later, his hair was perfectly gelled, suit spotless, smelling faintly of strong perfume that wasn't hers. He rushed in with forced panic. I came as fast as I could, he said, voice tight. The dinner ran longer, and my phone was on silent for the speeches. Sarah stared at him. Her body was too weak to argue or question details. She just nodded. He kissed her forehead, but it felt distant, mechanical. They walked slowly to the NICU. 3 tiny babies lay in 3 tiny incubators, each hooked to life-supporting monitors. Their chests rose and fell quickly, their bodies small and fragile. Sarah's heart broke and rebuilt itself in one breath. These were her children, her miracle, her reason to fight. Daniel stood stiffly beside her, arms crossed, eyes darting toward his buzzing phone. A message flashed. He ignored it. He tried to smile. But something about his expression seemed conflicted, like stress and guilt were pressing against each other inside him. They visited the babies together for a few minutes, but Sarah noticed how quickly Daniel shifted his weight, how he glanced at the clock more than at the infants. Minutes passed. Then he sighed. I'm sorry, Sarah. I need to head back. Back? She asked quietly. The board expects me to attend certain events. These people support the hospital. It's important for my career. If I just disappear, they'll notice. Her throat tightened. But the babies, they're in good hands. You stay. Rest. I'll come back after things calm down. He kissed her cheek and walked out without looking back. The door closed behind him, and Sarah felt the room tilt. Fear, love, exhaustion, and loneliness pressed down until she could hardly breathe. Days turned into a routine she didn't expect. Sarah, moving slowly but with fierce determination, spent hours in the NICU, whispering to each baby, learning their tiny faces and fragile rhythms. She pumped milk, wrote their names on little cards, and memorized every beep of every monitor. Daniel visited less and less. Late shifts, he said. Board meetings, he said. They need me, he said. But each excuse cut a new wound in her heart. One evening, after a long day at the NICU, Sarah returned to her hospital room alone. She sat with her hands on her stomach, remembering how she imagined motherhood. A warm home, a supportive husband, a strong family. Instead, she felt abandoned, just like Daniel had been as a child. A memory flashed. Daniel telling her how his father left right after he was born, how his mother cried in the kitchen for weeks, how he learned early that when stress came, people ran. Was he running now? Before she could answer that terrible question, her phone buzzed with a voicemail notification. She frowned. She hadn't made any calls. She pressed play. Daniel's voice filled the room, soft, warm, gentle in a way he hadn't spoken to her in months. I miss you too. And yes, I'll tell her soon. In the background, she could hear faint music and clinking glasses, sounds of the same kind of dinner he had just left. It hit her in one sharp realization. He must have dialed her by accident while calling someone else. The call went to voicemail and recorded what he thought was a private moment. Sarah froze. Tell who? What? Her heart stopped mid-beat. That message wasn't meant for her. And as the phone slipped from her hand, Sarah sensed the truth moving closer. Quiet, sharp, and ready to cut. Weeks after the triplets were finally discharged from the NICU and brought home, Daniel slammed the apartment door so hard the walls shook. Sarah, holding one of the babies against her shoulder, flinched as the noise ripped through the quiet space. The triplets stirred in their bassinets, tiny bodies trembling at the sudden shock. Daniel didn't stop to check on them. He didn't even glance their way. He stormed into the living room with an expression Sarah had never seen before. Cold, sharp, rehearsed. Sit down, he said, not a request, a command. Sarah felt her stomach drop. Something dark filled the air around him. She gently placed the baby back into the bassinet and took a seat on the edge of the couch. Her hands shook. Her breath thinned. Over the past days, he had been more distant than ever. Late nights, vague explanations. A suitcase that had moved from the back of the closet to the hallway. Because it's easier for call shifts. She wanted to believe him. She wanted to believe the voicemail she heard had been a misunderstanding. Now she wasn't so sure. Daniel did not sit. He stood above her like a judge delivering a sentence. We need to talk, he said, voice flat. I'm leaving. Her heart stilled. For a moment, she didn't understand what the words meant. Leaving? Leaving where? Leaving for how long? The babies were barely out of the NICU. She was still healing. This wasn't real. It couldn't be. What do you mean? She whispered. Daniel crossed his arms, avoiding her eyes. I can't do this anymore. This life, he gestured toward the cramped apartment, the bassinets, is suffocating. You and the babies. It's too much. I feel trapped. The words hit her like a strike to the ribs. She blinked, trying to understand the man standing in front of her. He wasn't the Daniel she married. He wasn't the man who promised to take care of everything. He wasn't the man she secretly funded through medical school. Her voice cracked. We're your family. He scoffed, a hard, bitter laugh. Family? Sarah, I didn't work this hard to end up stuck here, drowning in diapers and debt. I'm a doctor now. I have options. I deserve better than this. Her chest tightened painfully. What world is better than being with your children? Daniel finally looked at her. His eyes were cold and distant. Vanessa understands me, he said. She elevates me. The name stabbed through her like ice. Vanessa, the woman from the fundraising board, the woman behind the late-night messages, the woman whose voice she imagined on the other end of that mistaken voicemail, the woman with power, wealth, connections, the woman who could introduce him to the elite world he always craved, and the world Sarah could never give him. Sarah's breath trembled. Are you seeing her? He didn't even have the decency to hide it. Yes. The word dropped like a hammer. Her knees weakened. Her pulse raced in her ears. She tried to speak, but her voice choked on grief. Daniel continued, almost proud now. Shame nowhere in sight. She believes in my potential. She sees what I can become, and she actually fits the life I deserve. She moves in the same circles as the board. She's not embarrassed to want more. Every sentence cut deeper than the last. He stepped closer, lowering his voice to a cruel whisper. You don't, and you never will. Her vision blurred with tears, not because he chose another woman, but because he discarded their children just as easily. Daniel, she whispered, glancing toward the bassinets. They're your babies. He shrugged. They're your responsibility. You're better at home stuff anyway. I can't waste my career on midnight feedings and crying. I'm meant for more than this. Sarah's whole body trembled. And me? You'll survive, he said bluntly. You always do. You did before me, you'll do it after. You're tough, Sarah. She stared at him, barely breathing. He didn't appreciate her sacrifices. He didn't remember how she worked double shifts for years. He didn't know she paid for his entire education from her father's last gift. He didn't know because she supported him in silence, believing he would someday return that love. She saw then that he never understood devotion. He only understood validation. Daniel ran a hand through his hair and exhaled sharply. Look, don't make this ugly, Sarah. You'll be fine. I'll support the kids. Eventually, once things settle and my reputation is stable. The cruelty in that last word gutted her. Eventually. Like her children were an afterthought. Like she was a burden. Like their whole life together was disposable. He grabbed the packed suitcase from the hallway, one he must have prepared earlier in the week, and headed for the door. She stood on shaking legs. Please, don't do this. Don't leave us like this. They need their father. You said you'd never be like yours. He paused just long enough to look back. His face hardened. I already told Vanessa I'm leaving. She's expecting me tonight. Don't embarrass me by making a scene. Embarrass him, not hurt him, not break him, not betray him. Embarrass him. And with that final blow, he walked out of the apartment without looking back. The door closed behind him with a painful finality. Sarah collapsed to her knees, the baby's soft cries echoing her own silent heartbreak. Her chest ached so fiercely she nearly couldn't breathe. But even through the storm of emotion, one truth rose, sharp and undeniable. He had traded them for wealth, for status, for someone who fed the insecurity he hid beneath ambition, and he believed she would stay quiet. But he had no idea what she knew, what she held, or how far she would go to protect her children. And as Sarah wiped her tears, something inside her shifted, something that would soon awaken a strength Daniel never imagined she possessed. All three babies were crying at once, high, thin, desperate cries that pierced the silence of the small apartment. Sarah stood in the center of the living room, trembling from exhaustion, holding one baby in her arms while the other two wailed in their bassinets. Her hands shook so badly she almost dropped the bottle she was preparing. Tears streamed down her face without permission. She tried to shush them, whisper to them, rock them, but her body felt too weak, too broken, too overwhelmed to keep up. She hadn't slept more than an hour at a time since Daniel left. Her head throbbed, her legs wobbled, her chest burned, and still, she moved because no one else would. The room swirled around her as she sank onto the couch, clutching the baby against her chest. Her shoulders shook with silent sobs she tried to swallow. She didn't want the babies to feel her fear, but the pain inside her was too deep to hide. After what felt like hours, the babies finally fell asleep, one by one. The apartment became painfully quiet. The ticking clock on the wall was suddenly the loudest sound in the room. Sarah sat frozen in the dim light, staring at the wall, feeling nothing and everything at once. Numbness smothered her. It wrapped around her bones, her lungs, her heart. She felt empty, and yet full of so much hurt she thought she might break entirely. Slowly the numbness cracked. What leaked through wasn't weakness, it was anger. Not the explosive kind, not the loud kind, but the quiet, focused kind. The kind that formed when someone reached the end of their breaking point and found something powerful underneath. Her breathing steadied. Her tears stopped. Her jaw tightened. A new thought slid into her mind, sharp and uninvited. He left us. He chose someone else. He thinks I'll stay silent. Sarah rose to her feet, legs unsteady but determined. She walked to the bedroom, their bedroom, but it no longer felt shared. Daniel's clothes were gone. The drawer where he kept his watch and wallet was empty. She opened the drawer he never touched. Inside, she found the folder she had hidden for years behind old blankets and spare sheets. Her hands hovered over it before pulling it out. Inside were papers, stacks of them, her life written in numbers and signatures. Tuition receipts, bank transfers, student loan approvals, her father's inheritance withdrawal forms, proof of every sacrifice she made for him. She stared at those papers, and memories hit her like flashes of lightning. Her calling lenders late at night, begging for lower interest rates. Her working double shifts, sometimes triple, while he slept and studied. Her selling her father's watch collection, each piece a memory she let go of for Daniel's future. Her hiding headaches and back pain so he wouldn't feel guilty. Her lying about scholarships so he would feel proud instead of ashamed. She saw it all, and the pain inside her transformed into something sharper. Protection, resolve, clarity. Daniel thought she was weak. Daniel thought she would crumble without him. Daniel thought leaving her with 3 babies would break her. He didn't realize she held the very foundation of his entire career in her hands. A quiet voice rose inside her. I built him, and now I can destroy everything he built on top of me. Sarah didn't know anything about revenge. She didn't know much about the law. She didn't know how far she would need to go. But she did know this. She wasn't alone. The next morning, while the baby slept, she called her closest friend, Melissa, a co-worker at the assisted living center. Melissa had always been blunt, protective, the kind of woman who noticed things Sarah pretended not to see. When Melissa arrived and saw the papers spread across the table, her eyes widened. Sarah, he didn't know about any of this? She asked. Sarah shook her head. He still thinks some donor scholarship saved him. And he left you with 3 newborns? Melissa's voice cracked with fury. Sarah's whisper was barely audible. He said he deserved better. That was the moment something shifted in Melissa's expression. She placed a firm hand on Sarah's shoulder and spoke with a steady, controlled voice that cut through the fog. Sarah, you need a lawyer. Sarah froze. A lawyer? The word felt too big, too serious, too final. Lawyers meant battles, courtrooms, documents she didn't understand. Melissa tightened her grip, eyes locked on hers. You have proof, you have truth, and you have 3 babies who deserve justice. Find a lawyer, now. I'll help you. We'll start with someone who knows family law and money. Sarah swallowed hard, fear and strength twisting inside her like tangled threads. A lawyer. A battle, a future she'd never expected. And as she looked back down at the folder full of receipts and forms, something inside her whispered, this is only the beginning. And as the folder snapped shut, Sarah sensed the next step forming, quietly, powerfully, waiting for her to take it. The room felt too bright, too sharp, too awake for someone who barely slept. Papers, folders, and law books lined the shelves. A large wooden desk sat in the center, and behind it stood Ethan Clark, a calm, well-spoken man in his late 30s, known for helping families in crisis. His reputation was strong, his record stronger. Melissa had insisted he was the right person. He looked up as Sarah entered, and something in his expression shifted the moment he saw the heavy folder in her hands, like he could already feel the weight inside it. Come in, he said, voice steady. You must be Sarah. She moved carefully, almost timidly, as if she were stepping into a world she didn't belong to. She sat down, hands trembling slightly as she placed the folder on the table between them. Ethan opened it. Tuition receipts, bank transfers, loan approvals in her name, inheritance withdrawal slips signed by her, proof she had paid for every step of Daniel's path to becoming a doctor. Ethan's eyebrows rose slowly, then higher still. He leaned back, stunned. Sarah, you paid for everything. She nodded once quietly. He flipped another page. There were also pay stubs from her 2 jobs, overlapping dates that matched his semesters and rotations. He exhaled through his nose, still flipping through pages. This isn't a small contribution. This is years of financial support. He owes you far more than he thinks. The room steadied into a reflective quiet. Sarah looked down at her hands in her lap. I never wanted anything back, she said. I did it because I loved him, because I believed he would take care of us when he finished. I thought we were building the same life. Ethan softened. But he didn't. She swallowed painfully. No, he left. He nodded, understanding, settling in his expression. Then now we protect you, and your children. The investigation began. Ethan moved quickly. Sarah followed, carrying both fear and a new spark of determination inside her. They gathered everything. Payroll records showing she worked 2 and sometimes 3 jobs during Daniel's schooling. Tuition confirmations signed in her name as financial guarantor. Email logs where she communicated with administrators. Calling herself Daniel's financial advocate, so his enrollment would not be canceled. Copies of Daniel's recent financial disclosure to the court, where he claimed he had funded his own education and portrayed Sarah as dependent and unstable. Then Ethan brought in a tech specialist, Jared, a quiet man in his early 40s who worked with digital recovery. His role was simple: uncover anything Daniel tried to hide, using Sarah's legal access to her own devices and backups. He plugged Sarah's phone into his laptop. Lines of code flashed. Files loaded. Hidden data emerged. Jared narrowed his eyes and clicked a single file. A deleted voice message. He played it. Daniel's voice filled the room. Light, excited, disturbingly warm. Once I'm free from the babies and her, we can announce us. Sarah felt her stomach twist. Her hands clenched the armrests. The room spun for just a moment. Ethan's face hardened. This isn't abandonment, he said. This is intentional. He planned this. Sarah closed her eyes in pain. He said we were too much, that he felt trapped. Because he wanted out, Ethan said. Not because he was overwhelmed, because he saw something he thought was better. Jared clicked again. More messages appeared. Screenshots of texts Sarah had saved before deleting the conversation to try to forget. Vanessa's name appeared above flirtatious lines, plans for dinners, mentions of our future, jokes about how demanding new mothers can be. Reflection wrapped around the pain, sharp memories of all her sacrifices, every long night, every shift, every whisper of hope she once held. And now she saw it clearly. Daniel didn't leave because he felt trapped. He left because he believed he deserved someone with status, connections, wealth, the very things he always felt he lacked growing up. This wasn't weakness. This was choice. Ethan gathered the documents, stacking them carefully. His voice was calm but firm. Sarah, I can help you, he said, but you need to understand something. She looked up slowly. This isn't just divorce. He leaned in. This could cost him his license. Her heart dropped. His license. His entire medical career. Ethan's eyes stayed on hers, steady and certain. He built his career on money that wasn't his, on loans and inheritance tied to your name, and he lied under oath about it. On top of that, he abandoned his newborn children. The board will not take that lightly, especially if the court documents show he misrepresented his past. Emotion crashed through her. Shock, fear, justice, anger, all twisting together. The weight of what was coming settled over her like a heavy shadow. She didn't ask for revenge. She didn't seek to ruin him. But the truth was stronger than her intentions, and now it was moving forward. As Ethan closed the folder, Sarah felt a shift in the air, something bigger, louder, and far more public waiting just ahead. Daniel walked in first, chin lifted, shoulders squared, wearing his best suit. Confidence radiated off him like heat. He didn't look nervous. He didn't look ashamed. He looked proud, like a man arriving to win. Beside him stood Vanessa, dressed in sharp elegance, her hand hooked around his arm. Her posture was polished, her expression controlled. She believed she was walking beside a rising star, not a man with secrets hanging over his head. The room buzzed with quiet whispers. A few hospital board members sat near the back, observing, because the ethics committee had already heard rumors. Court reporters adjusted their equipment. Even the judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, seemed prepared for a complicated case. And then Sarah entered. She moved slowly, carefully, holding a thick binder against her chest. Her lawyer, Ethan, walked firmly beside her. No dramatic outfit, no jewelry, just a plain dress that fit her new life. Practical, simple, honest. But Daniel saw none of that. He only saw someone he believed he had already defeated. He leaned toward his attorney and whispered something smug. Vanessa smiled, her fingers tightening on his arm as if she already saw their victory. The judge tapped her pen. "Let's begin." Daniel's attorney rose first, speaking with smooth confidence. "Your Honor, my client, Dr. Daniel Carter, has been burdened with an emotionally unstable spouse. She has been financially dependent on him for years. She created a home environment filled with stress he could not reasonably manage while pursuing a demanding medical career." He gestured toward Daniel as if introducing a hero. "Dr. Carter has shown responsibility. He has shown dedication. He has supported his wife and 3 children to the best of his ability, while she refused to contribute financially." He let the words hang. "She contributed nothing. She lived off my client." Ethan stood. "Your Honor, that is factually false, and we have proof." The judge nodded. "Proceed, Mr. Clark." Ethan walked to the judge's bench and placed the binder down. Thick, heavy, filled with years of sacrifice. He opened it slowly. "Your Honor," he said, voice steady, "my client, Sarah Carter, born Sarah Bennett, paid for 87% of Dr. Carter's medical education." Gasps rippled through the room. Daniel's smile faltered. Ethan lifted the first set of documents, tuition receipts signed by Sarah Bennett, dated across his entire medical program. These payments came from her personal inheritance, funds left to her by her late father. He placed them on the judge's desk. Next came the bank statements. These showed direct transfers from Ms. Bennett's account to the university over several years, matching each semester's tuition. Then student loan documents, all approved under Sarah Bennett's name, not Dr. Carter's. She is the primary borrower. He is not listed anywhere. The judge's eyebrows lifted slowly. Daniel's attorney shifted uncomfortably. "Your Honor, these payments could have been voluntary." Ethan cut him off with another document. "Voluntary financial support is not the issue. Fraud is." He laid down a financial affidavit Daniel had filed for this very case, one stating he had paid his own way through medical school and that Sarah had never contributed. "And this," Ethan continued, "is an attempt to falsify court records." Whispers erupted. The judge leaned forward sharply. Daniel's face drained of color, but Ethan wasn't finished. "Additionally," Ethan said, "we submit Exhibit F, a recovered voicemail left accidentally by Dr. Carter on my client's phone." He clicked a small speaker on the desk. A familiar voice filled the room. Daniel's voice. "Once I'm free from the babies in her, we can announce us." Vanessa's head snapped toward Daniel. Her eyes widened. Her hand slowly slid off his arm. Another recovered line played from a different message. "Don't worry, she'll never fight back. She needs me." Sarah's throat tightened. The room felt too small, too charged, but she stayed still, strong, present. Daniel stood abruptly. "That was taken out of context." Ethan didn't flinch. "There is no context in which abandoning your 3 premature infants is justified, Dr. Carter." The judge slammed her gavel once. "Sit down." Daniel sat, shaken. Vanessa rose from her seat and stepped away from him. She looked at him as if seeing him for the first time. Cold, angry, betrayed. "You told me she was crazy," she whispered. "You said she used you. You said you paid for everything." Her voice carried across the courtroom. Daniel reached for her, but she pulled away sharply. The room exploded in murmurs. Ethan closed the binder and faced the judge. "Your Honor, the evidence is clear. Dr. Carter benefited from Ms. Carter's sacrifices, lied about it under oath, and attempted to abandon his family for personal gain. He used his professional image to manipulate the situation while hiding the true source of his success." The judge lifted her chin, eyes fixed on Daniel. "Dr. Carter," she said, voice cold and authoritative, "these documents will be forwarded to the medical board and the hospital's ethics committee. We will be reviewing this for possible professional misconduct and perjury." Daniel's face collapsed. His career, his image, his future, all slipping through his fingers in one breath. And as the courtroom fell silent, a new fear crept into Daniel's eyes, one that would grow even deeper in what came next. His phone exploded with calls, one after another, vibrating endlessly across the nightstand. He jolted awake, heart pounding. He grabbed the phone, expecting messages from Vanessa or the hospital about his next shift. Instead, notice of immediate suspension, medical board ethics committee, mandatory hearing, pending investigation, financial misrepresentation, falsification of affidavits, family abandonment. His breath caught. His chest tightened. He sat frozen in bed, staring at the screen as the world he built began to crumble in front of him. But the worst part wasn't the hospital. It was the message Vanessa left. Just one sentence. Just one knife. Do not contact me again. You lied to me too. No signature, no softness, no explanation. Everything inside him dropped. He scrambled out of bed and turned on the TV, hands shaking. There it was, a local news segment, a short but brutal headline: local doctor under investigation for misusing spouse's funds and abandoning premature triplets. His picture appeared beside the headline, smiling, confident, wearing the same suit he wore on his first day of residency. The reporter mentioned the courtroom proceedings, the forwarded documents, and the pending board investigation. His stomach twisted violently. He wasn't in control anymore. He rushed to call coworkers. No one answered. He texted friends. All left him on read. He called Vanessa. The call rang once, then went straight to a blocked notification. His social world, once full, once admiring, now evaporated in minutes. Daniel stood in the middle of his small rented condo, staring at the walls as silence crept in. The place suddenly felt temporary, flimsy, like a hotel room he was never meant to stay in. He remembered the first time he walked into a hospital as a student. How proud he felt. The white coat ceremony, the applause, the certainty that he had finally become someone. He remembered Vanessa telling him he was destined for bigger things. Her smile, her encouragement, her promises. He had drunk every word like water. He remembered how he looked at Sarah before he left, seeing her as small, tired, ordinary. Someone he believed couldn't keep up with his rising world. Someone he thought needed him more than he needed her. He remembered thinking Vanessa was his future. Beautiful, wealthy, connected. But all of that had depended on one thing: his image, his reputation, his clean record. And Sarah had pulled the curtain back. He sank down onto the couch, head buried in his hands. He whispered to himself, "What have I done?" But the reflection came too late. The consequences came fast. A letter from the hospital hand-delivered to his door. Effective immediately, his clinical privileges were suspended pending investigation. He was not to see patients, wear his white coat, or represent himself as an active physician until further notice. Neighbors whispered in the hallway when he walked past. Colleagues texted each other, but not him. Emails from the medical board demanded documents, explanations, statements. Then came the court's temporary orders. He owed child support. He owed back support for the months he disappeared. His paycheck, what was left of it, would be garnished. His entire life, built on prestige, was falling apart like it had never been solid at all. His mother called, her voice trembling with disappointment and worry. "Daniel, I saw the news. How could you do this to your family, to those babies? You swore you'd never be like your father." He hung up before she finished. Every wall he leaned on collapsed, and then he realized the truth. He had nowhere left to turn, except Sarah. Night fell. Daniel stood outside Sarah's small apartment, shivering in the cold. His hair was messy, his face pale, his suit wrinkled and no longer impressive. He looked nothing like the confident, polished doctor who once stood in court beside Vanessa. He looked broken. He knocked. At first, no one answered. The muffled sound of a cartoon and childish laughter came through the door. Then the cartoons muted, and the door opened an inch. Sarah appeared, tired, steady, holding herself with a quiet strength he didn't recognize. She had a child on her hip and two behind her legs. The triplets were bigger now, standing, curious, clinging to her. She looked at him the way someone looks at a stranger. He swallowed hard. "I made a mistake," he whispered. His voice cracked in a way that made him sound like a boy again, abandoned like he once was. I, I need my family back. I can't lose everything. I can be better. I'll try, please. Sarah's eyes softened for just a second, because she wasn't cruel, but they didn't break. She didn't speak. She didn't argue. She didn't cry. She simply shook her head once, slow and calm, and closed the door gently but firmly. Daniel's forehead fell against the wood. He whispered desperately, voice shaking, "Please, don't leave me with nothing." But Sarah didn't leave him with nothing. She left him with the truth he had run from, the truth she had carried alone, the truth he never bothered to see until it swallowed him whole. Behind the door, Sarah walked away slowly, her steps calm, her heart steady, her mind clear. She had 3 babies to protect, a future to rebuild, and justice already in motion. And as Daniel slid down the door in defeat, Sarah sensed the final chapter approaching, where the consequences he feared most would finally arrive. The triplets charged across the small living room, stumbling, laughing, reaching for their mother. Their legs were stronger now, their hair thicker, their voices clearer. Toys scattered across the floor, sunlight poured through the curtains, and the warmth of the moment hit Sarah so strongly it almost knocked the breath from her chest. Not in fear, in gratitude, in disbelief that she had survived everything that tried to break her. She knelt down, scooping the children into her arms, their tiny hands clinging to her shirt, their faces lighting up when she kissed their cheeks. Their laughter wrapped around her like a gentle shield, chasing away the last shadows Daniel left behind. Sarah stood slowly, carrying one child on her hip while the other 2 toddled beside her. She looked around the apartment, the same walls that once felt too tight, too quiet, too heavy. Now they felt safe, warm. Hers. She had painted the nursery herself, using soft colors she never had the chance to use before. She kept the blinds open for sunlight, something she never dared do when Daniel complained about early mornings. She placed small photo frames on the walls with pictures of her and the kids. First steps, messy meals, tiny hospital bracelets in a shadow box. Moments he had missed, moments she cherished. There was no emptiness now, only life, only renewal. She sat on the floor with the triplets and watched them play, their small fingers gripping blocks, their curiosity blooming. One stacked a tower, another knocked it down, the third clapped and squealed. In that moment, she felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace, soft, steady, real. Her mind drifted back briefly, just briefly, to the woman she once was. The woman who worked 2 jobs, hid her sacrifices, whispered encouragement into Daniel's dreams while bearing her own. The woman who believed supporting him meant supporting them. She realized she had been wrong. She didn't lose herself when he left. She found herself. The strength she discovered didn't come from any lawyer, any courtroom, any victory. It came from surviving the night he walked away, and every night after. It came from holding her babies through the worst pain she ever knew, and still standing. It came from truth, from resilience, from finally choosing herself. A soft smile touched her lips as she stood and walked to the bookshelf. On the top shelf sat a labeled box she had placed there weeks earlier. Closed chapters. Inside was the evidence binder, the receipts, the documents, the proof of everything she once gave, and everything he once took for granted. She placed the binder inside the box, closed the lid, and gently pushed it back onto the shelf. Not forgotten, not erased, just done. The court orders now ensured consistent support for the children. The board investigation had moved on without her needing to watch every step. She no longer checked the news for updates about Daniel. His story no longer controlled hers. She lifted the babies into their stroller, grabbed her keys, and opened the front door. A fresh breeze rushed in, filling the apartment with new light. Sarah stepped outside with her children, her chest lifting with a steady, quiet joy. She didn't know what the future held, but she knew this. She was ready. She walked forward, pushing the stroller into the bright, open world, and for the first time, she felt free. Because some stories don't end with revenge. They begin again with peace. I hope you enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed creating it. Like, share, and comment on the lessons you've learned. Let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. See you in my next video. He slammed the plate so hard that grains of rice scattered across the tiled floor. Can't you even cook right, Maya? No salt, you call this food? His voice roared through the small apartment, shaking the cheap glass frames on the wall. Maya stood still, spoon trembling in her hand. She'd spent her last few dollars buying that rice, her last hour hoping he'd notice her effort. But all he saw was the missing salt. Before she could speak, his hand came down hard across her face. The world tilted, the plate shattered, and somewhere deep inside her, something else broke too. She didn't scream, she didn't fight back. She just whispered through her swollen lip, "One day, Henry, you'll taste what you just served me." He laughed, brushing past her without a glance, never realizing that in that moment, he'd awakened the quiet storm that would change his life forever. He beat her just because the rice had no salt, but he didn't see her next move coming. Hi family, welcome back. Before we begin, please click subscribe. Every single click helps us tell stories of courage and truth. And in the comments, tell us where you're watching from. Because when we share these stories together, we remind each other that even in pain, we can rise. The fork slammed against the plate so hard that rice scattered across the tiled floor. Can't you even cook right, Maya? No salt. You call this food? Henry roared, his voice echoing through the cramped apartment. The sound hit harder than the slap that followed. His hand connected with her cheek in one swift motion, sharp and loud. Maya's head jerked to the side. The spoon fell from her trembling hand. She didn't cry out, only pressed her palm against the red mark spreading across her face. The small dining table shook as Henry shoved his chair back. You sit at home all day, wasting my money, and can't even make a simple meal right. Maya's breathing quickened, but she stayed still. She had worked all afternoon, standing over a pot of boiling rice, while Caleb, her 7-year-old son, drew pictures beside her feet. She had stretched the last packet of rice, using half the oil left in the bottle. The salt had run out 2 days ago, and her promise to buy more tomorrow had turned into this moment. Henry, she whispered, her voice trembling. Please, I'll make something else. Shut up, he snapped, grabbing the edge of the table. You're lucky I even came home tonight. Caleb's toy car rolled from the couch and clattered near Henry's feet. The boy froze. Henry's glare cut toward him like a blade. Pick that up and go to your room. Maya's eyes darted to her son. Caleb, go, she said softly, her lip quivered. When he disappeared down the hallway, she finally exhaled. Henry wiped his mouth with the back of his hand and scoffed. You're pathetic. Maybe Vanessa was right about you. The name stung. Vanessa, the woman he worked with. The one whose texts lit up his phone late at night. Maya had pretended not to notice for months. As he stormed out, slamming the door, silence filled the apartment except for the soft hum of the refrigerator and Maya's shallow breathing. Her reflection in the dark window looked like a stranger. One swollen cheek, trembling hands, and eyes that had forgotten their light. She knelt, picking up the broken plate piece by piece. A drop of blood from her palm fell into the scattered rice. Her voice was barely a whisper, but steady. One day, Henry, you'll taste what you just served me. Outside, the hallway light flickered, a quiet foreshadowing that something in her had just shifted forever. 3 years earlier, the same kitchen had looked completely different, bright, warm, full of laughter. A younger Henry sat on the counter, grinning as Maya stirred a pot of stew. She had just graduated from nursing school, her white gown still neatly folded on the chair. I told you, Henry said proudly, kissing her forehead. We'll make it big together. You'll get your hospital job, I'll get promoted, and we'll move out of this box. Maya smiled shyly. As long as we're together, I don't care how small it is. Back then, his touch had been gentle. His laugh filled the room. She believed every word he said, but promises fade faster than steam. Cut to months later, Maya sitting alone at the kitchen table, surrounded by unpaid bills. Henry's new job at Grant Logistics wasn't going as planned. Overtime pay was late, and his mother called almost daily, whispering poison through the phone. She's holding you back, Henry. A nurse? Please, find someone who can lift you, not weigh you down. He didn't defend Maya anymore. Slowly, his warmth turned cold, his words sharper. When Maya found out she was pregnant, he didn't smile, he sighed. We can barely feed ourselves, he muttered. Maya gave up her job search to care for Caleb, promising to return once things got better. But better never came. One afternoon, she discovered an unopened letter in her late aunt's handwriting, a lawyer's seal at the bottom. The envelope trembled in her hands. Her aunt, a retired doctor, had been like a mother to her. Maya couldn't bring herself to open it. She hid it inside a glass jar behind the flour tin, telling herself she'd read it when the time was right. That night, Henry came home drunk, laughing about office drinks with Vanessa. When Maya asked who Vanessa was, he waved her off. Just someone who appreciates conversation unlike you. The glow in his eyes from years ago had been replaced by something darker: resentment, maybe regret. Still, Maya stayed. Not out of weakness, but because of Caleb. Because she remembered the man who once held her and promised her forever. As she lay in bed that night, staring at the ceiling, she whispered to herself, "One day I'll open that letter." Outside, thunder rolled in the distance, not of rain, but of a storm waiting in her heart. The clinic smelled faintly of disinfectant and mint lotion. Maya sat on the edge of the bed, her sleeve tugged halfway down, revealing a dark purple bruise blooming along her wrist. She tried to smile when Nurse Tasha entered, her supervisor, mentor, and one of the few people who still called her sweetheart. "What happened this time?" Tasha asked gently, her eyes scanning Maya's face. "Oh, it's nothing," Maya replied too quickly. "I burned myself cooking." Tasha tilted her head, unimpressed. "A burn doesn't look like fingers wrapped around your arm." She stepped closer, lowering her voice. "Is it Henry again?" Maya's lips trembled, but she said nothing. She had already learned that silence was safer. She had once told a neighbor after the first slap word got back to Henry, and the bruises doubled. Silence had become her armor. Tasha sighed, pulled a small notepad from her pocket, and began to write something down. "You don't have to talk," she said, "but I'm documenting this, just in case you ever need help." Maya blinked. "Help?" "Evidence," Tasha clarified. "For when you're ready to stop hiding the truth." The words hit Maya harder than any slap could. She looked down at her trembling hands. Her reflection in the clinic's metal tray showed eyes she barely recognized, tired, dull, aged beyond her years. "I'm not strong like that," she whispered. Tasha placed a hand on her shoulder. "Strength doesn't start with fighting back. It starts with admitting you deserve better." For a moment, Maya felt warmth, safety she hadn't felt in years. But it flickered out the moment her phone buzzed on the counter. "Henry, you better be home before 6. And cook something edible this time." Maya's stomach twisted. She stuffed the phone into her bag and forced a shaky smile. "I have to go." Tasha watched her. "Gather her things." "Maya," she called softly, "if he touches you again, I'll call someone you won't expect. Someone who can really help." Maya paused at the door, heart pounding. "What do you mean?" Tasha just gave a knowing smile. "Let's pray you never have to find out." As Maya stepped into the fading afternoon light, a chill ran down her spine. For the first time, she wondered if the help Tasha mentioned had something to do with that unopened letter still hidden behind the flour tin. The bar lights flickered gold against polished glasses as laughter filled the air. Henry leaned back in his chair, a tumbler of whiskey in hand, while the woman across from him, Vanessa Blake, his boss's assistant, twirled her straw between crimson-painted fingers. She was the kind of woman who made confidence look easy. Sharp suit, red lipstick, diamond watch. "Your wife doesn't appreciate you," Vanessa purred. "A man who works as hard as you deserves more than rice without salt," Henry smirked. "You have no idea." But he liked that she said it. He liked the way she looked at him like he was a man of power. Not the man who came home to unpaid bills and complaints. She made him feel seen again, respected, even desired. And that was dangerous. Meanwhile, back home, Maya reheated leftover soup on the stove. The clock read 10:47 p.m. She had called Henry twice. No answer. Caleb had fallen asleep at the table, crayons still clutched in his hand. She carried him gently to bed, whispering, "Daddy will be home soon." When the door finally opened, Henry stumbled in, smelling of perfume and whiskey. Maya looked up from the couch, hopeful. "You didn't answer my calls." "I was worried," he scoffed. "I'm not a child. Stop treating me like one." Her eyes caught the red smudge on his collar. Lipstick. Her chest tightened. "Whose is that?" He paused, then sneered. Someone who doesn't nag. Maya's voice trembled. Henry, please, please what? Maybe if you acted like a real wife, I wouldn't have to find someone else. He shoved past her, grabbed a beer from the fridge, and disappeared into the bedroom, slamming the door. Maya stood frozen, the sound echoing through the empty apartment. Later that night, she sat by the window, staring at the moonlight, dancing across the sink full of dishes. Her fingers traced the red mark still faint on her cheek from the last slap. She thought about the letter hidden in the kitchen jar, the one from her late aunt she still hadn't opened. Her eyes glistened as she whispered to herself, maybe she left me something more than memories. A cold wind slipped through the cracked window, carrying the faint smell of rain. Somewhere deep inside her, a small, steady flame began to rise, a warning that the next storm wouldn't just break her, it would change everything. The morning started with silence, the kind that comes before destruction. Maya stood by the stove stirring rice, her wrist wrapped in a cheap bandage. It still throbbed from when Henry grabbed her the night before, twisting it until she dropped the bowl. Caleb sat at the table, drawing a sun with a blue crayon, humming softly to fill the emptiness. When Henry's footsteps echoed down the hallway, Maya's pulse quickened. He had stayed out all night again. The smell of his cologne mixed with alcohol reached her before his voice did. "What's that?" he snapped, eyeing the pot. "Rice," she said quietly. "I added some seasoning since there's no salt left." His jaw tightened. "You had one job, Maya. One. I give you money." She turned, her voice barely above a whisper. "You haven't given me anything in 3 weeks, Henry." The air froze. Caleb stopped humming. Henry's hand gripped the edge of the table. "Are you calling me a liar?" "No," she said quickly, eyes down. "I'm just saying." The sound came fast, another slap, hard enough to send her reeling against the counter. The pot tipped, boiling rice spilling across the floor. Caleb screamed, rushing toward her, but Henry's glare stopped him cold. "Go to your room," Henry thundered. "Daddy, please," Caleb cried. "Stop hurting Mommy." Henry turned, eyes bloodshot, and roared. "Go!" The little boy ran, sobbing. The apartment door slammed behind him as Maya crumpled to her knees, clutching her face. The rice scattered like white tears across the tiles. Henry paced, panting. "You make me do this, Maya. You push me until I can't control it." She didn't answer. She couldn't. Her mind drifted to the jar in the cabinet, the one hiding her aunt's letter. A part of her whispered that maybe inside that envelope was her way out. When he finally stormed out, slamming the door so hard the light flickered, she stayed frozen for several minutes. Then, trembling, she crawled to the corner where Caleb's drawing lay on the floor. A sun, bright yellow, smiling. Tears blurred her vision. She whispered to herself, "This ends tonight." She grabbed her phone and dialed the only person she trusted. Her voice was hoarse but steady. "Tasha, please, I need help." Outside, thunder rolled across the sky, as if the world itself had heard her decision. Maya woke to the soft hum of hospital monitors and the faint smell of antiseptic. Her eyelids fluttered open, revealing a sterile white ceiling. For a moment she panicked, unsure where she was or how she got there. Then the memory hit. Henry's slap, Caleb's scream, the sound of the door slamming. A gentle hand touched hers. "Hey," a familiar voice said softly. "You're safe now." It was Tasha. Her eyes, always firm and warm, now brimmed with worry. She sat beside the bed, still in her scrubs, her short curls pinned back beneath her cap. "You collapsed before I got there," she said. The neighbor called when she heard Caleb crying. "He's fine, he's staying with my sister for now." Maya's throat tightened. "He saw everything," she whispered. Tasha nodded. "But he's safe, and now it's time to make sure you are too." The curtains shifted. A man in a gray suit entered mid-50s, clean-cut, carrying a leather folder. His voice was calm but authoritative. "Mrs. Reed, my name is Mr. Grant. I'm your late aunt's attorney." Maya blinked. "My aunt? I never opened her letter." He gave a faint smile. "I know. That's why I came. Your aunt left you something, a trust, but not just money." He opened the folder and slid a document toward her. "She left you Serenity Haven, a rehabilitation center she founded years ago. You're its rightful owner." Maya stared, speechless. "A center? For what?" For women, survivors, she wanted it in the hands of someone who understood pain and could turn it into healing. Tears welled up. She remembered her aunt's gentle hands, her laughter, her words. When life hurts you, don't just survive. Build something from it. Tasha squeezed her hand. See? The letter you were too scared to open was your way out all along. Maya pressed a trembling hand to her chest. But Henry, he'll never let me go. Mr. Grant's gaze sharpened. He won't have a choice. We'll relocate you quietly. Change your records. You'll start over under your aunt's foundation. Maya turned her face toward the window, sunlight spilling across her bruised cheek. For the first time, she didn't feel powerless. She felt awake. Her voice was steady when she whispered, "Then let's begin." Outside, an ambulance siren wailed faintly, a warning that her old life was ending, and something far stronger was about to rise in its place. 3 weeks later, Henry sat at a bar with a smug grin, swirling ice in his glass. The bartender leaned over. "Heard your wife left town," he said casually. Henry chuckled. "Yeah, couldn't handle a real man. Good riddance." He lifted his drink. Freedom tastes better than any home-cooked meal. But behind his arrogance hid a strange restlessness. No one had seen Maya since that night. No hospital bills. No police visits. No trace. It was as if she had vanished from the earth. What Henry didn't know was that 2 towns away, Maya stood on the balcony of Serenity Haven, the rehabilitation center her aunt had left her. The building stretched across a peaceful hillside, pale stone walls, blooming gardens, soft sunlight on wide glass windows. It was a place designed for recovery, not fear. Her reflection in the window startled her. Her cheek had healed. Her hair was trimmed short, her eyes no longer hollow. Tasha had moved in temporarily to help her settle, managing clinic records and bringing Caleb every weekend. "This place suits you," Tasha said one afternoon, smiling as she handed her tea. "You look like someone who finally belongs." Maya smiled faintly. "For the first time, I think I do." In the evenings, she spent hours in her aunt's old office, wooden shelves filled with journals and letters. One night, as she organized files, she found a sealed envelope marked Grant Logistics Private. Her breath caught. The same name as Henry's company. She unfolded the documents carefully. They were partnership records showing that Serenity Haven had received its original funding from Grant Logistics Foundation. But one signature stood out: Vanessa Blake's. The same woman Henry had been sneaking around with. A slow, bitter realization formed. Vanessa and Henry weren't just having an affair, they were trying to control her inheritance. Her aunt's trust was tied to the company Henry worked for. Maya leaned back in her chair, heart pounding. "So that's why he stayed," she murmured. "He wasn't just angry. He was planning something." The wind rustled the papers on her desk as if whispering confirmation. She turned off the lamp, looking out at the moonlit garden below. "If they think I'm gone," she whispered, "then that's exactly what I'll let them believe." Somewhere in the distance, the faint hum of city traffic carried a promise. Henry's world was about to collapse, and he wouldn't see it coming. The next morning, the sun poured through the clinic's tall windows, casting golden stripes across Maya's desk. She sat reading the Grant Logistics file again, tracing Vanessa's signature with her fingertip. Each page told a story: company shares, donation routes, and suspicious transfers between Vanessa and Henry's department. It was all there, but she needed proof that tied them together publicly. Tasha walked in carrying coffee and a folder. "I've been thinking," she said, settling into the chair opposite Maya. "Henry still believes you disappeared. What if we use that?" Maya looked up. "How?" Tasha grinned. "People like him can't resist bragging. I'll pay him a friendly visit. Pretend I'm checking in. Say I feel sorry for him. Maybe even mention that I miss you too. If he takes the bait, he'll talk." Maya hesitated. "That's risky." "So was marrying him," Tasha said dryly. "Let me handle this." Later that week, Tasha walked into the downtown bar where Henry often drank after work. She wore casual clothes, a sympathetic smile, and the confidence of a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. "Henry," she greeted warmly, "I heard about Maya leaving. I'm sorry." He gave a bitter laugh. "Sorry? Don't be. She was dead weight. Couldn't even cook without burning something." Tasha leaned closer. "You look like you're doing well, though. Promotion soon?" Henry smirked. "You could say that," Vanessa and I have plans. Once Mr. Grant retires, we'll be running things at Grant Logistics. She's got connections. And when we take over, money won't be a problem ever again. Tasha nodded, pretending admiration. Sounds impressive, he chuckled, lowering his voice. Don't tell anyone, but we've already started moving some of the foundation's cash into safer accounts. By the time anyone notices, I'll be too important to touch. Tasha's heart pounded, but she kept her face calm. Your secret's safe with me. As soon as she left the bar, she opened her phone, hit record, and saved the entire conversation. That night, she played it for Maya, who sat silently, eyes fixed on the glowing screen. Maya's voice was calm, but her hands trembled slightly. He's stealing from the foundation my aunt built. Tasha nodded. And now we can prove it. Maya looked toward the window, her reflection sharp in the glass. Then it's time to return home one last time. Outside, the wind stirred the trees, whispering the beginning of her quiet revenge. The city shimmered in the glow of evening lights as invitations to Grant Logistics' 25th anniversary gala went out to every major name in the business world. Henry stood in front of the mirror, adjusting his tie with a smug grin. Black tie, red carpet, champagne, he muttered. Finally, my night. Vanessa, seated on the bed in a sequin gold dress, crossed her legs and smiled. Our night, darling. Mr. Grant's retiring, and after tonight, we'll be running the show. Henry kissed her cheek. We earned it. The old man trusts me more than anyone. But behind his self-satisfied grin lay a hidden arrogance he didn't know someone else had also received an invitation. Across town, Maya held the same envelope in her trembling hands. The gold lettering glimmered under the soft light of her office at Serenity Haven. Mr. Grant himself had sent it with a handwritten note. Time to meet your new team. Tasha stood nearby, watching her. You don't have to go, she said carefully. We already have the recording. We can take it straight to the board. Maya's gaze hardened. No. They humiliated me in public. It's only fitting that truth finds them the same way. She opened her wardrobe. Inside hung the deep blue gown her aunt had left her, wrapped in plastic. She ran her fingers along the silk fabric, her reflection steady and calm. This time, she whispered, I walk in as who I am, not who he tried to make me. Tasha smiled faintly. Then I guess I'll book a table near the stage. The night of the gala arrived with blinding lights, camera flashes, and laughter echoing through the grand ballroom. Henry stepped onto the red carpet, arm in arm with Vanessa, reporters calling their names. Mr. Reed, rumor has it you're next in line for CEO. Henry grinned wide. Rumors travel fast, huh? Inside, the chandelier shimmered like ice. Glasses clinked, music swelled, and at the center of it all stood Mr. Grant, older now, kind eyes scanning the crowd. His assistant leaned close and whispered, Ma'am, she's here. Henry turned, just as the doors opened. Maya entered poised, radiant, the deep blue gown glinting under the lights. Gasps rippled through the room. Henry's smile vanished, his face paling as his past walked gracefully toward him. And in her calm, steady eyes, he saw something terrifying knowledge. He had no idea the night he called his would end with his undoing. The ballroom buzzed with conversation until Mr. Grant tapped the microphone. Ladies and gentlemen, he began, his voice rich and steady, thank you for joining us tonight to celebrate 25 years of integrity, innovation, and trust. Henry straightened his jacket, squeezing Vanessa's hand. Here it comes, he whispered. Our moment, Mr. Grant continued. Before I announce my successor, I must introduce someone very special, a woman whose compassion, resilience, and leadership embody what this company stands for. Please welcome our new majority shareholder, Mrs. Maya Carter Reed. The applause began, hesitantly, then fell into stunned silence. Heads turned, cameras flashed. Henry's smile froze. What did he just say? Vanessa blinked, her glass halfway to her lips. That can't be right. All eyes followed Maya as she walked onto the stage in her blue gown, the very picture of calm power. Her movements were slow, deliberate, each step a declaration. She took the microphone from Mr. Grant, her soft voice cutting cleanly through the murmurs. Good evening, she said. Most of you knew my late aunt, Dr. Evelyn Carter, the founder of Serenity Haven and an early investor in Grant Logistics. Before she passed, she transferred her shares to me. Until recently, I didn't realize how much she had entrusted me with. Her eyes met Henry's across the room. Some people believe silence means weakness, she continued. But silence can be strategy. Sometimes you must let the world think you're gone before you return with truth. Gasps rippled through the guests. Henry's face turned pale. He stood abruptly. "This is nonsense. You're lying." Maya tilted her head slightly. "Am I?" Mr. Grant stepped forward, placing a document on the podium. "I can confirm Mrs. Reed's ownership. She holds 61% of company shares. Effective tonight, she is the controlling shareholder and board chair." The crowd erupted into murmurs and camera flashes. Vanessa reached for Henry's arm. "Henry, what's happening?" But he was frozen, sweat beading on his forehead. "This can't be real," he whispered. Maya's gaze didn't waver. "It's very real, Henry. You once told me I wasn't good enough to stand beside you. Tonight, I'm standing above you, not for revenge, but for justice." A beat of silence hung in the air before she added softly, "And justice, Henry, always demands evidence." She turned toward the giant screen behind her. "Shall we show them?" The projector flickered to life. The ballroom lights dimmed. Every guest turned toward the massive screen behind Maya. For a second, there was only static. Then a recording began to play. Henry's voice filled the room, clear and arrogant. "Vanessa and I will take over once Mr. Grant retires. The fool doesn't even know we've already started moving the foundation's funds." Gasps echoed through the hall. Maya stood perfectly still, her expression calm, eyes fixed on Henry. He went pale, gripping the edge of the table. "That's a lie," he shouted, his voice cracking. "She doctored that." Maya's tone was steady. "That recording was made by Tasha Lewis, a registered nurse and verified witness. She simply gave you what you wanted most, a chance to brag." On the screen, another clip played. Vanessa's laughter followed Henry's voice. "Once the money's out, we'll be untouchable." The crowd erupted in whispers. Reporters lifted their cameras, capturing every stunned reaction. Vanessa's hand flew to her mouth. "Turn it off!" she hissed. "Henry, do something!" Henry lunged toward the stage, but two security guards blocked his path. "Mr. Grant stepped forward, face grim. "I trusted you, Henry. You abused that trust, both professionally and personally." Henry struggled. "You don't know what she's done to me. She left me." Maya finally turned to face him fully, her eyes glinting beneath the lights. "I left because I refused to die in your anger. You hit me over rice, Henry over salt." Her voice trembled slightly, but she didn't look away. "Now you'll learn what it means to starve for dignity." The audience went silent. Then came the final clip, Henry's drunken confession to Vanessa, caught on the bar's surveillance camera. She deserved it. Maybe she'll learn next time. Police officers entered quietly through the side doors. Mr. Grant nodded at them. "We've already filed charges for embezzlement, fraud, and domestic assault." Henry's defiance shattered. "You set me up," he yelled, struggling as they cuffed him. Maya's voice softened. "No, Henry, you set yourself up the day you raised your hand against love." The officers escorted him out as cameras flashed wildly. Vanessa sank into her chair, shaking. Maya turned to her, lowering the mic. "You helped him bury me," she whispered. "Now tell me, Vanessa, ready to dig yourself out?" Vanessa's eyes flicked toward the press, swarming closer, trembling as truth cornered her. The crowd buzzed in a stunned hush as Henry disappeared through the ballroom doors, his shouts echoing faintly down the corridor. Reporters swarmed closer, flashes painting the air white. Maya remained on the stage, calm as ever, her blue gown glinting under the spotlight. Vanessa sat frozen at the front table, her mascara streaked, hands shaking. When the police turned toward her, she broke. "Wait," she cried, voice cracking. "I'll tell you everything." The hall quieted again. Mr. Grant stepped forward, microphone in hand. "Go on, Miss Blake." Vanessa rose unsteadily, eyes darting toward Maya. "Henry said it was harmless," she began, trembling. "He said the foundation had extra funds that no one would notice if we moved a little." I believed him. Then he started talking about getting rid of her. A murmur rippled through the guests. Maya's face remained still, but her hand tightened around the microphone. Vanessa's voice grew softer. "He told me he'd make her disappear if she tried to open that inheritance letter. He said she didn't deserve what she was given. He made me help transfer the money, he said. Once she was gone, everything would be ours. The words hit like a cold wind through the hall. A reporter shouted, "Did you know about the abuse?" Vanessa hesitated, eyes flooding. "Yes. I saw the bruises. I heard him yell at her on the phone once. I told myself it wasn't my business." Her voice cracked. "But it was." The officers moved closer. "Miss, Blake, please hand over your phone." Vanessa unlocked it with trembling fingers. "There are recordings," she said. "Every conversation, every transfer. I kept them because I was scared of him too." Maya's eyes softened, not with forgiveness, but with weary understanding. "Fear doesn't excuse silence," she said quietly, "but truth can still heal what silence once protected." Mr. Grant turned to the crowd. "Effective immediately, Vanessa Blake is suspended pending full investigation." Vanessa looked at Maya through tears. "I'm sorry." Maya exhaled slowly, lowering the mic. "Be sorry to the women who will never get to stand on this stage." The police led Vanessa away. For a moment, the ballroom was utterly silent until Maya turned back to the audience, her voice calm but resolute. "This," she said, "is not the story of a victim. It's the story of a woman who learned that truth, no matter how buried, will always rise." Outside, rain began to fall softly against the glass, washing the city clean. Sunlight streamed through the tall windows of Serenity Haven, casting soft gold over rows of blooming white lilies. The once quiet clinic now hummed with life, patients chatting in the courtyard, laughter echoing faintly from the therapy rooms. Maya walked slowly down the hallway, clipboard in hand, her movements calm but purposeful. It had been 3 months since the gala. Henry was awaiting trial. Vanessa had turned state witness. The chaos had settled into silence, a silence that didn't frighten Maya anymore. Tasha entered from the side corridor, holding a cup of coffee. "Full house today," she said with a smile. "Your aunt would be proud." Maya returned the smile. "She taught me to heal people even when I'm still learning how to heal myself." In the group therapy room, a circle of women sat waiting, each with different stories, but the same look in their eyes. The cautious hope of someone learning to breathe again. Maya took her seat among them. One woman, Rosa, spoke first. "I still wake up hearing him yell. Some days I feel like I'll never be free." Maya listened, then answered softly. "Freedom isn't a day, Rosa. It's a process. Every time you speak instead of hide, that's freedom. Every time you say no and mean it, that's freedom." The women nodded, some smiling through tears. Caleb peeked in from the doorway, now 8, holding a small potted plant. "Mom," he said shyly, "I brought this for the garden." Maya's heart swelled. "That's perfect, sweetheart. Let's plant it after the session." As the meeting ended, Tasha handed her an envelope. "Delivered this morning from the courthouse." Maya opened it slowly. Inside was the notice. Trial date, State versus Henry Reed. Her fingers tightened around the paper. "Are you ready for this?" Tasha asked. Maya looked out through the window where Caleb was kneeling in the garden, digging a small hole for his plant. "I used to be scared of seeing him again," she said softly. "Now I just want to look him in the eye and let him see what peace looks like." The afternoon breeze rustled through the flowers outside, carrying faint whispers of laughter and life. Maya exhaled deeply. "It's time," she said. "Not to fight, but to finish." And as the sunlight touched her face, the calm before the verdict began to settle, quiet, powerful, and unbreakable. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled. Journalists lined the back wall, cameras poised. Maya sat in the front row beside Tasha, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She looked serene, almost detached, though her heart thudded quietly beneath her blouse. Across the aisle, Henry sat at the defense table in a dark suit, his once confident posture deflated. The chains around his wrists gleamed faintly when he shifted. The judge entered, gray-haired and stern. "Court is now in session. State of New York versus Henry Reed." The prosecutor, a sharp young woman named Miss Carter, stood first. "Your Honor, the evidence before you, recordings, financial transfers, and multiple witness testimonies prove beyond doubt that the defendant engaged in embezzlement, fraud, and repeated domestic assault." Henry's lawyer rose to object, but his voice lacked conviction. "My client, he's remorseful, The judge raised a hand. Save it for sentencing. Maya's gaze met Henry's. For a fleeting second, she saw the man he used to be, the one who brought her flowers, who laughed in small kitchens. But that man was buried beneath the greed, the lies, the fists. The prosecutor called Vanessa to the stand. She spoke clearly, voice trembling only once. He said he'd ruin her if she ever left. I helped hide the money. I regret it every day. Henry slammed his fist against the table. Liar! The bailiff stepped forward, hand on his shoulder. The judge's gavel struck sharply. Order! After hours of testimony, silence filled the courtroom. Then came the verdict. On all counts, guilty. Henry froze, color draining from his face. Mr. Reed, the judge continued, you are hereby sentenced to 8 years in federal prison and restitution of full embezzled funds to the Serenity Haven Foundation. Tasha squeezed Maya's hand. The room erupted in murmurs, flashes from cameras painting the air. Henry turned toward Maya, his eyes desperate. Maya, please. I loved you. I lost control. She stood slowly. Love doesn't raise its hand, Henry. It holds it out. The officers led him away. As the doors closed behind him, Maya exhaled a long, trembling breath that carried years of silence out of her body. She turned to Tasha. Let's go home. Outside the courthouse, the wind lifted her hair gently, as if congratulating her. And though justice had spoken, Maya knew her true verdict awaited not in court, but in how she would choose to live free. A year later, Serenity Haven had grown into something more than a clinic. It was a sanctuary. The once quiet halls now echoed with laughter, children's footsteps, and the steady rhythm of rebuilding lives. On the front lawn, a new sign gleamed under the morning sun. Serenity Haven Foundation, for every woman who chose to survive. Maya stood beside it, dressed in a crisp white suit, watching Caleb water the flowers. His small voice carried through the garden. Mom, look! My plant grew. She smiled. The little seed he planted months ago had blossomed into a sunflower, tall, golden, unbroken. That's what happens when you give something care instead of fear, she said softly. Inside the main hall, the press had gathered for the center's 1-year anniversary. Reporters adjusted their mics as Maya stepped to the podium. Cameras clicked, capturing the woman who once hid behind bruises, now standing as a symbol of grace and power. Exactly 1 year ago, she began, I was a woman afraid to speak. I thought silence protected peace, but silence only protects pain. Today, this foundation stands for every survivor who thought she had no voice until she learned she was her own rescue. Applause rippled through the crowd. Tasha stood at the back, tears glistening in her eyes. Maya continued, her tone calm but resolute. Henry Reed's actions broke bones, but not my spirit. He taught me something he never meant to. That strength isn't in shouting, it's in rising quietly until the world has no choice but to listen. A reporter called out, Mrs. Reed, what would you say to women still living in fear? Maya paused, her gaze sweeping the room. I'd tell them this. Don't wait for someone to save you. The moment you decide you deserve peace, you've already begun to save yourself. Outside, the crowd gathered around the new memorial stone dedicated to Dr. Evelyn Carter. Maya knelt, running her fingers over the engraved words. From pain, she built healing. Caleb slipped his hand into hers. Mom, are we happy now? She looked at him, his bright eyes, his hopeful grin, and nodded. We're not just happy, Caleb. We're free. As the camera panned upward, sunlight bathed the garden. Maya turned to the crowd one last time and said quietly, He beat me because the rice had no salt, but life taught me real flavor comes from healing. The music swelled. Fade to white.